one and only Ann Coulter. Ann, welcome to the show this evening.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And you are literally the one person that I told my producers here at SiriusXM, who are wonderful. I told them, get Ann Coulter. The minute that the Jeffrey Epstein story broke this week, with the whole thing where now suddenly he's finally, it looks like being charged with something that looks like it could have some sticking power here. The reason why, of course, I wanted to speak with you is because you have been on this story about this guy since 2005, before everybody else was even paying attention. When this was just a little local story, you've been on this and been, talking about this and trying to get other people interested in this. Tell our listeners, take our listeners through the whole story, would you? I mean, because you can do this better than anybody. Tell our listeners the whole saga. I'm just going to hand it over to you.
I'll try to without eating too much time up. And I just noticed, although the investigation started in 2005, I guess no one other than the Palm Beach police knew about it until 2006. But that is when it came to light. And I was just checking this on Nexus tonight. The KABC host, John Phillips, ended an interview with me yesterday saying, now you're going to write about this, right? And I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, yeah. So I guess I will be writing about it again. And one of the things I was looking at was, because all these high-minded statements of principle from the media right now, in all of 2006, it was nothing but a local story. And everything we know about Jeffrey Epstein today is what we knew then. Thank you, Palm Beach Police Department. They really did a spectacular job. For 11 months, they got a tip from a woman in West Palm Beach who said that her stepdaughter was being paid to be molested by a man living in a mansion in Palm Beach. So they questioned the girl. She broke down, gave them details. Obviously, a lot of these girls were troubled. I think that goes without saying. Troubled in some sense, some more, some less so. But they figured out it was Jeffrey Epstein. They had the Palm Beach Sanitation Department. This went on for 11 months. Palm Beach Sanitation Department take his trash directly to the police department. In the trash, they found notes from girls, high school transcripts, girls calling in and saying, "I'll come after soccer practice." They traced, when they were interviewing one of the girls, she got a call from a procurer. The madams that Jeffrey Epstein used were a little bit older, 22, 23, and they'd get paid for bringing young girls to the house to be molested by him. When the police were interviewing one of the 14-year-old girls, she got a call from the procurer. They tape recorded it. This is just some of the evidence they had. They ended up with statements from butlers from the house testifying to, delivering flowers to one high school girl after her performance in a high school play, even though you don't have to know that you're having sex with an underage girl under California, or rather Florida law, and the age of consent is 18. It's pretty overwhelming that Jeffrey Epstein not only knew that they were 14 and 15-year-old girls, but was specifically requesting 14 and 15-year-old girls. He told one procurer, the main one, who called herself, I'm like Heidi Fleiss, she said to the police. She said she offered him, Epstein, a 23-year-old girl, and he said, no, too old. The younger the better, the younger the better. So he'd bring these young girls to her. This went on for a long time. The police have this beautiful case wrapped up in a bow, deliver it to the state prosecutor, because everything that the girls were describing, everything the police were investigating, is in fact a state crime. You may wonder how a federal prosecutor, U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, comes into this at all. Well, that's because the state prosecutor, a big Democrat who had spent 3 years pursuing Rush Limbaugh for back medication. His name is Barry Krischer. He is the true villain of this case, and it's been interesting to me how he has been completely dropped out of the case by the media, including in stories, some of which I've tweeted out. I don't know if people even understand what I'm saying, but in lines from the New York Times and the Daily Beast about the story, they act as if the case went directly from the Palm Beach police to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Well, no, police aren't federal officers. They're investigating state crimes. And the only way to make these crimes federal is if you, as the Southern District's office is doing now, and I guess as Alex Acosta, the U.S. Attorney, attempted to do, is to tie the child molestation to interstate commerce. So anyway, Barry Krishner gets this case, refuses to arrest Epstein, refuses to bring charges. He pulls this totally sleazy move so that he can say, oh, no, it wasn't my decision, it was the grand jury. In Florida, typically a prosecutor will only go to a grand jury for a capital case. But this was Krishner's, he did this in other cases too, his sleazy way of getting out of not bringing charges at all. So nobody knows what happens in the grand jury room except the prosecutor. He's presenting the evidence, and lo and behold, and that's only some of the evidence that I was just quickly describing to you, despite all of this evidence, the grand jury returns only a single count against Epstein for solicitation of prostitution. Nothing about minors, nothing about lewd and lascivious contact, absolutely no prison time whatsoever, just, okay, you're sentenced to probation, which, by the way, as we know in Epstein's case, meant absolutely nothing. So the chief of police, wonderful and brave man who was horribly harassed. There are true heroes and true villains in this story that you are not getting from the mainstream media accounts. I may have to have a few more articles on this. He is a true hero. I mean, the Dershowitz Epstein assembles this dream team of Alan Dershowitz and Jerry Lefcourt in New York, a local attorney. I think his name was Jack Goldfarber, and they hire private investigators to start investigating following not only the girl victims, but the chief of police and his investigators. They're being followed. The girls are being harassed. One private investigator presented himself to one of the girls and said, and claimed to be a policeman. So, Michael Ryder, the chief of police, wants to bring charges against him for that. No. Once Barry Krishner found out that it was Jeffrey Epstein, and by the way, the chief of police was telling the state prosecutor as the investigation was ongoing. He tells them what they're finding, but he doesn't say the name of the perp. He says, "Look, we're investigating this guy. This is what we're finding. We have these girls. We have sworn statements. We have these notes from his garbage. We have the dildos. Blah blah blah." And Krishner, the prosecutor, is saying to him, "We've got to put this guy away." But as soon as he gets the case and finds out it's Jeffrey Epstein, nope, nothing. A slap on the wrist would have been harsher than what was given. So that's when the chief of police goes mental. He starts publicly denouncing Krishner. He demands that Krishner remove himself from the case. He goes to the FBI, asks them to intervene, but as I just indicated, these are state crimes. You can't just call the FBI in. But it's a big enough case, it's serious enough, that the FBI, and I guess with Alex Acosta, the U.S. Attorney's approval, they start investigating. They're putting their case together, and look, what Alex Acosta did is not good. He struck a private deal with Epstein. He said his office, as I just described, the police were under this enormous pressure from Epstein's fancy lawyers and private investigators. So Acosta has said, my office, my prosecutors, they're having their personal lives delved into. They have private investigators out of them. So he did pull a chicken move and strike a secret plea deal with Epstein without telling the victims about it. Now, luckily, he is a federal prosecutor, so there's a federal law that says if you don't keep the victims informed, the victims can come forward and they can breach the agreement. But this whole thing is under seal. It's done secretly. I will say, at least the federal prosecutor, here he is looking into state crimes. It's not usually a U.S. attorney's bailiwick to be looking at state crimes, to be looking at child molestation. He finally at least gets some jail time for Epstein. He gets Epstein to plead guilty to what? Federal crimes? No, state crimes. So it gets sent back to Barry Krishner and the state, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. It wasn't Acosta's decision that Epstein should have this glorious 6 days a week, only at nights, having to spend it in a private wing of the Palm Beach jail, not a regular prison, not every day. Weekends off, gets to go back to his mansion. No, that wasn't Acosta's decision. That was back in the bailiwick of Barry Krischer. Again, the prime villain in this case, who did nothing and got the whole ball rolling. Acosta, so he gets... Epstein pleads guilty to now finally the minors are mentioned, to 2 state charges, felonies. He gets whatever it was, 13 months in prison. He now has to register as a sex offender, and he agrees to pay all of the victims, I think up to 30 of them, or up to 40 of them, 30 or 40, at least $150,000 apiece. Not to contest their claims, pay their attorney's fees. So at least we're getting something here. This time, the national media is not covering it. Is only because I was spending time in Palm Beach and see it in the local press, which was the only place it was being covered, that I got Bill O'Reilly to lead his show with it one night. He claimed he was going, at the end of the segment, he said, I remember this, he said, and we're going to stay on top of this case. And every few weeks, I'd shoot an email to Bill saying, hey, remember that case you were going to stay on top of?
Anything on that? Yeah, now, here, let's get to this. This is the thing, and that people are really upset about, is this just... This is a classic case of the powerful,
yes,
covering it for themselves. And this is many powerful people. And part of what this agreement that Acosta struck with Epstein's lawyers was that they would grant almost immunity to everybody that could in any way be an accomplice to this or involved in this. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's very
important. Everybody was like, and then they sealed it. Then they sealed all the whole damn thing, so we couldn't even hear about it or learn what was in there.
Yeah.
Tell us about this. How is this? Is this a typical type of thing that's done? Is this unusual? It seems unusual.
Very unusual, though, again, it's an unusual case for the feds to be taking. But what you just said, these are all extremely important points. All the powerful people around Epstein, and the question hanging out there that, again, the media keeps, blowing over, oh, isn't this funny? He doesn't really make his money, trading on Wall Street. Well, where does his money come from? Can we get to the bottom of that? Because wherever the money comes from, it's already shut down 2 prosecutions, and I'm not that confident that a year from now anybody's going to know his name and he won't be, back in Palm Beach and Lolita Island. Apparently, there's a lot of money behind this guy, and we don't know where it's coming from. The one thing everyone agrees is it doesn't come from what he claims it comes from. Oh, I'm just a very good investor. No. That's BS. He has a mansion in New York that is like a museum. He's got a mansion in Palm Beach. He owns an island in the Caribbean. He owns, I gather, a very nice place in Paris and a huge fortress in New Mexico. Where does all this money come from? And is that connected to the fact that 2 prosecutions have been shut down already? I mean, all these people are bragging about how great, and okay, good, love Southern District's office. Hope they don't drop the ball, and I hope the fact that liberals seem very excited that there's some sort of tertiary, vague Trump connection will keep it in the news. But I think by the time we find out, or anyone finds out, where the money is coming from, it will disappear from the news, and we will never hear his name again.
Now, okay, one of the other things that's really interesting to me about all of this is there's been reports that one of the things that he asked these, young girls to do, and with this, human trafficking pyramid scheme that he had, where he would lure these girls in, and then he would tell them, I'll give you even more money if you bring someone else to me.
Yes.
And one of the things that apparently he asked them to do, and you tell me if this is wrong, is that he asked them to sleep with some other powerful people, and then there were video cameras all over the place, and report back to me about what they like. And his whole place was like wired with video cameras and stuff because he was recording all sorts of things. This looks like a giant blackmail apparatus. Am I being
also
too conspiratorial here, or what?
Also very crucial, what you said before, that the secret sealed deal with the U.S. attorney said that no one involved with Epstein, not his co-conspirators, not the procurers, and not his attorneys could be prosecuted. Yes, very suspicious that he seems to have blackmail material, on all these people. There are cameras all over his mansions. He asked the girls to come back to him and report on the sexual proclivities of all of these powerful men. So, you can see why I despair of him ever being brought to justice. Yeah, they can all get on their high horses now. But wow, it's been 14 years and we didn't hear a peep out of the media, and we didn't hear a peep out of the Southern District's office. It's only because they think they have this Trump connection, which is why don't tell anyone. I think that part of it is insane.
Yeah, that's interesting that might be the only part that might not, because I've read all the articles about what they have with this Trump connection, and apparently, the guy was a member at Mar-a-Lago, and Trump had said something about him in an interview in 2002 where he said, oh yeah, he's a great guy, likes the ladies, really young.
Right.
And, that's all that I can see. There was one person that accused Trump, but then that case was dropped. This was in 2016. It was during the
crazy
campaign.
Lady. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's all, I see with the Trump connection, but there were a lot of other really powerful men and businessmen and Hollywood figures, all sorts,
and
that
international leaders and politicians. That's why I think the biggest question is, who is funding all this? It seems, I'm not saying that this is true, this is just, who knows. One of my theories was that he was like the concierge for the underage sex ring, and rich men would pay him to go to Orgy Island or down to Palm Beach or New York, I guess, and he'd arrange, and they'd pay him to have all these places, but he was just like the concierge of these places, getting the girls there. But I don't think there are that many billionaires who have this particular weird sexual fetish. This isn't normal. So you need both, hundreds of millions of dollars and weird sexual fetish, and you're willing to pay Jeffrey Epstein. So it does make you think that there could be a state sponsor behind this.
I have no idea.
Again, I don't think it's Russia, but let's say it is to keep the left interested.
Who knows? I know Mr. Hayward wants to ask you a question on this too, John.
Hey, John.
Hey there. The media has been trying to turn this into a Trump scandal. It's like watching wizards do a magic spell. It's the biggest goalpost move since Russian collusion turned into obstruction of justice, turned into whatever, they turned it into after that. All of a sudden, this is all about Alex Acosta and Trump, and Epstein himself doesn't matter. If this was actually all happening in a courtroom, Epstein would be sneaking out the back door, and nobody would be looking at him because everybody would be pointing at Acosta and Trump and screaming at the top of their lungs. It's like he's not even a factor in the story anymore. Never mind Bill Clinton racking up frequent flyer miles on the Lolita Express. It's all about Alex Acosta and Donald Trump. It's incredible to watch them do this, and it's worked so well that this afternoon, Senator Bob Menendez called on Acosta to resign.
I didn't know that. That is very funny, but like I say, you don't have to follow my lead, but I'm just happy to let it keep going that way, because I've never seen so much attention to this case. I've been trying to get someone interested in for an awfully long time. As I say, basically everything we know now, we knew in 2006, and the only newspaper that was writing about it, at least with any regularity. New York Post had a couple of items. Daily News had one when Mark Green gave money back to Epstein, but there wasn't much explanation of the case. Only one article all that time. New York Times, one article on page A19, and Bill O'Reilly. Other than that, it was the Palm Beach Post, Palm Beach Daily News, and that's the only place you would know this is even going on. So, the media's sudden outrage and indignation, well, I'm glad to see they do finally have some moral scruples. I think it would totally disappear if they didn't think they had. The one thing I wonder is, some Trump angle to finish that sentence, I always wonder, do they really believe this, or is this just fun? It's so crazy, the idea that I mean, I just, like I say, I don't want to elaborate on why I think this is insane, but I don't think little girls are Trump's thing. I think we would know of that by now. I think we know what his things are. It's,
I think he has a type.
Models.
I think he has a type, and that's as we can see, the Stormy Daniels thing, the little girls aren't his thing. But here, let me ask you this also, Anne. This isn't a Democrat. He was a Democrat donor. He was a major Democrat donor. So, and that's clear.
I don't think he ever gave to a Republican.
But at the same time, there's a lot of Republicans involved here that didn't behave well. And when, as you explained in your great description there about what went down, once this was out of the hands of that local, Palm Beach attorney,
also a Democrat,
as a Democrat, and then Acosta, who was appointed by George W. Bush, was in charge of this. Suddenly, that's when Epstein hires some Republican lawyers like Ken Starr. So suddenly he was like working that angle, right? I mean, this is seems to me about I will buy the best defense I can, and I will get this is like the rich and powerful able to help the rich and powerful.
Yeah.
To me, so that's one of the reasons why, if the left wants to just, use the Trump thing, whatever, just as long as the truth comes out here about what was done here, because at the end of the day, it's little girls were being abused. And we got Epstein's lawyers saying that they were just prostitutes. I'm sorry. It's really disgusting to hear someone argue that a 15-year-old, these girls that had braces on their teeth and looked so young, that they are prostitutes. What?
It's really monstrous, and it is both sides. It's definitely more of a Democratic scandal, though I won't press that point with liberals. But you're right. I think there's a Federal Society lawyer at Kirkland and Ellis. That's why Bill Barr couldn't get involved in the case, because he was a partner at Kirkland and Ellis. But I think his name is Jay Lefkowitz. He and Ken Starr came in, and Jay, something like that, knew Alex Acosta, and he was talking to him, and there are a lot of emails going back between the two of them. I think that is pretty shameful. I know this is what lawyers do. You try to put the best defense forward for your client, but it's one thing. It's one thing to put on a strong defense. It's another to start investigating and harassing the prosecutors, going into their personal lives, following cops around, following the chief of police around, defaming the girls. That was the big argument that Alan Dershowitz used with the chief villain in the story, Barry Krischer, the state prosecutor. Alan Dershowitz went through the girls, and again, these are 14, 15-year-old girls, and somewhat troubled if they were doing this at all, obviously not very wealthy, going through their MySpace pages and producing, these indictments of them for they seem to be very enthusiastic about smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol. And that was the excuse Barry Krischer used. I don't find them very credible witnesses because these 15-year-old girls drink and use pot.
Well, that's exactly how child predators, how they target their victims as troubled girls. Hello. You'd figure that a prosecutor would understand this, I'm just saying.
It does look very suspicious. Michael Ryder, the chief of police, also describes just the enormous pressure he came under from various prominent people in Palm Beach when they found out it was Jeffrey Epstein to drop the case, and it's no big deal. The Epstein's lawyers denounced the chief of police, the hero, Michael Ryder, calling him a born-again lunatic. Having read all this, I find it really interesting 14 years later to hear hosts on MSNBC denouncing this behavior when they were happy to see Michael Ryder and the heroes of this case be defamed like this as it was actually going on.
Now, let me ask you also, the Southern District of New York has their Public Corruption Division is the one that opened up this new case against Epstein. What do you think that portends, that it's the Public Corruption Division? Should we read anything into that, Ann Coulter?
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I did not work for a U.S. Attorney's Office, so I'm not sure how cases get assigned, if it's really very strict in that regard. I will find out and get back to you. If it does mean something, I will say, I think there's a lot of public corruption to go around, and I hope they start with Barry Krischer.
Now, do you think that you mentioned Krischer, who nobody is talking about him other than you, and you, as you explained in great detail here, it started with him. That's the reason why Acosta got involved in the first place. Now, Acosta is, of course, our labor secretary now for the Trump administration. Should he be, resign? Should he, be booted because of the scandal with this, or what do you think?
I'm kind of torn. I mean, he did chicken out. He did buckle. But he did more than the guy who was supposed to be handling this case, point one. Point two, the reason he's more of a focus right now is not just because he's Trump's labor secretary, although for the media that's the main reason, but it's because he's federal, and there's a federal law, not a state law, that says a prosecutor is required to treat victims with at least as much respect as they treat criminals. They have the same rights. They have to be notified. They have to be told of proceedings. Before any plea agreement is struck, the victims have to be notified. All of that is a federal law, and Acosta's office totally blew that off in this case. So there is a case proceeding against his office. Now, the remedy for that isn't resign from whatever position you happen to hold now that has nothing to do with what you did 5 years ago. The remedy for that is the agreement gets breached, and it's over. And you can. So, in other words, the victims, number one, they can come back and sue personally, but another prosecution can be brought, as is being done in the Southern District's office anyway. But the Southern District's office, well, actually, the Southern District's office isn't cut off by double jeopardy at all, because the only thing Alex Acosta, I suppose this is lucky, got Epstein to plead guilty to were state charges. So all those federal charges, I don't know what's in the agreement that he struck, but assuming it were valid, the federal charges certainly wouldn't be blocked by double jeopardy. They may be blocked.
Yeah, we got
by
all that
agreement.
Vast trove. We got the vast trove of photographs that was mentioned yesterday by the prosecutors in New York, and we also have, it looks like, new victims. So, yeah.
I think there's going to be quite a lot of victims and quite a lot of perpetrators. I seriously despair of Epstein. Perhaps he will be the scapegoat. They'll throw him in prison, throw away the key, and everyone will forget about him. But we will never get to the bottom of who funded this entire operation.
Jeez. Now I know Mr. Hayward's got another question for you, John. If you wanted to jump in.
People naturally say this reminds them of Harvey Weinstein, because, again, you have a powerful rich guy getting away with all this stuff for so long. And I've even seen a few Hollywood types popping up on social media and saying, oh, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, open secret, we all knew about him, same as with Weinstein. But the other thing this reminds me of in a more disturbing way is the Grooming Gang scandals over in England, because the parallel there is that the system of justice was disabled. Now, in that case, it was extreme political correctness that did it. In this case, it was Epstein's connections, all the money, whatever else he brought to bear. But the bottom line is that once the high levels decided not to treat this as a serious crime, all of the other excuses, justifications, trash talking the girls, treating them like they were garbage, who cares what happens to them, it's all exactly the same. It's almost word for word, beat for beat.
That is a really good point. You should write that up. You're absolutely right. This is not at all comparable to Weinstein. I mean, at least he had adult victims. The Grooming Gang comparison is much closer, and the political correctness, I mean, in a sense, preventing any prosecution. I mean, these poor girls, the way they were treated is really just unbelievably shameful. I mean, at the time when it first came out, and this was when the prosecutors, or rather the representatives for the victims, for the girls, sued the prosecutors to breach the agreement that had been struck between the U.S. Attorney's Office and Epstein, because they have a right to under the law. And that's when some of the Jane Does came forward and started naming people like Alan Dershowitz and Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. And I know a lot of people on our side were trying to turn this into a partisan issue then. Look, if you wanted to turn this into a partisan issue, this is definitely more of a Democrat scandal than a Republican scandal. But I just wouldn't personally pitch it in those terms at all. It's monstrous behavior. There's some guilt on both sides, sides, but it's both. It is just the establishments and the elites allowing the least among us to be really horribly abused and brushed under the rug, just as you say, like with the grooming gangs.
And it seems a lot also, another parallel I see is with the big sting that was done of these wealthy individuals that were bribing people to get their kids into fancy colleges. I mean, obviously, the egregiousness of this crime is way more than that, but still, it's the same type of behavior, powerful, thinking that there's their own set of rules. And they're usually the same people that lecture the rest of us about how awful and deplorable we are. This is what really upsets people, the real division here, the real politics of this.
Yes, and I feel like our country is getting more and more like that. In part because of my favorite subject, and yours, Rebecca, immigration. I mean, that is one of the striking and wonderful things about our old country, the social equality, and that Charles Murray writes in his book. I forget the recent one. Actually, it's like 5-6 years old. But the one about the rich versus the poor and how the lifestyles are changing so much, just going in completely different directions. For example, divorce. You always hear, divorce rate is like 50%. No, not among the college educated. It's quite rare among the college educated. Illegitimacy, extremely rare among the college educated. You see just the two divisions going in completely different directions. And one of the things he mentions is back in whatever town he grew up in Iowa, he said, the CEO of the company would live next to the postman, would live next to, a manufacturing magnate. Not anymore. We are becoming more like a Latin American country with the very rich separated from everyone else. So I agree with that.
You know what, Ann Coulter, I want to thank you so much for joining us, for explaining this in such detail to our listeners. And I can't wait for your column this week, which is going to come out tomorrow. I'm going to be waiting for that thing to go up, and we'll have it up at Breitbart.com. And of course, people can check it out at your website, AnnCoulter.com, and follow you on Twitter as you give us all little hints and clues about what you're going to write. And again, thank you so much for joining us.